Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. My name is Kevin Hankinson. I'm the Managing Director of the Secondary Teacher Education Program. And I'm joined today by my colleague, Candace Everett, the Program Specialist of the Secondary Teacher Education Programs, as well as our Chair, Kendra Hearn. And so we may hear from both of them at the end as we get to our Q&A, but we thought we might start today with a couple of topics that tend to be on the minds of our matriculated students. And so we thought we would start with these topics, but then also leave time for questions at the end. So we'll go ahead and begin. It's important to understand that our clinical experiences are really important to us. We believe they are the thread that really tie together our program, all of its different courses and its experiences. And we believe that it's important to be in the field as often as you can. This past year, sometimes that's been a virtual field with online learning and such, but despite the challenges, we were still involved in a clinical experience, in being virtual and working alongside teachers to support the students all across Southeast Michigan. And we want this clinical experience to be an opportunity for all of you to take the knowledge and skills you're developing and acquiring in your coursework at U of M and enact them in the real world with kids and with your mentor teacher to serve as a guide. But the mentor teacher isn't the only guide. In addition to the site-based clinical educator that you'll encounter, your mentor teacher, you'll also have a university-based clinical educator, your field instructor. And there will be other course instructors within our program that will also be there to support you, to help you to get a sense of how to take the knowledge and skills from educational psychology or educational and multicultural society and bring them down into your classroom wherever you may be. There are largely two types of clinical experiences. There are practicum or pre-student teaching clinical experiences, and then student teaching. Practicum clinical experiences last 2 semesters. There's a practicum clinical experience in the summer term when you first begin the program, and then there's another practicum phase in the fall term. In these early clinical experiences, it's really important to ask questions and take lots of notes. And it also gives you regular opportunities to work directly with middle school and high school students and classroom teachers. And we hope that by engaging in these initial teaching experiences, you're able to build a really strong foundation that then you can continue to build upon during your student teaching clinical experience. Quite regularly, you'll be gathering records of practice, which you will then bring back into seminar so that you can help deconstruct some of them with your peers or with the help of your course and field instructor as well. As you progress into the student teaching clinical experience, this is where you're really starting to walk the walk, so to speak. You're having the opportunity to take on increasing responsibilities as it relates to instruction and assessment and reflection. And you start to take on some of those lead teaching responsibilities in different sections of content. So it's in the student teaching clinical experience that you assume a professional role in the school, not only academically, but socially as well. You'll begin to plan, facilitate, lead, and assess effective and appropriate lessons with guidance and support from your mentor teacher and field instructor. You'll continue to gather those records of practice and bring with you back to seminar those problems of practice, those problems that are real and in classrooms to this day, and participate in the school community. Maybe that's attending parent-teacher conferences. Maybe that's going to see the wrestling team wrestle or the swim meet or whatever it might be, but trying to integrate yourself into the school community more broadly than maybe just the 4 brick and mortar walls that you may have spent more of your early time in. It's important to understand how we think about clinical experiences as being just a concrete way we can help to expose you to the diversity of schools across Southeast Michigan. Over the last couple of years, the secondary teacher education program has tried to think really concretely around what diversity of clinical experiences mean. And some of the ways in which we've tried to document and measure diversity is across three strands: demographics, poverty level, and achievement. And what we've tried to do is get a sense of how our schools in Southeast Michigan are broke up across different demographics. You know, are they predominantly comprised of students of color, or are they average? That is, in alignment with the Michigan average of students and the compositions of schools, or are they predominantly white? With respect to poverty level, likewise, are they within the average, or are they above or below average? Do they have a higher socioeconomic status or a lower socioeconomic status in that community? And how does that, again, compare to the average? And then finally, achievement. As we look at standardized test scores, and there's some debate on how accurate they may be in measuring assessment, or measuring achievement rather. But what we do is we take those standardized test scores and we organize them from high to low, and we take a look to see what schools are in the bottom third, the middle third, and the top third. And what we get then is this really interesting matrix that we can place all of our schools, and then we can get a sense of where our students, where our teaching interns need to be so that they can continue to stretch themselves over the course of our program. Some interns will come to our program having a very narrow pathway through perhaps these three strands. And to say that perhaps your middle school and high school experiences were of the same nature, of the same descriptions, but maybe you have spent time in very different middle and high schools, and maybe you've even had the chance post high school to maybe work in other schools that maybe represent different elements of this matrix. And so what we want you to do is to really engage in some reflection early on and ask yourself, where do you still need to spend some time so that upon graduation, you feel as though you are comfortable and confident to enter any clinical experience that may surface, but also to extend it even further, to apply for any job posting that you find, so that, again, there are as few barriers out there after graduation. Other ways we think about diversity are grade level, middle schools and high schools, as well as type, you know, public schools versus independent and private schools. Students sometimes wonder, well, where do MAC interns go? And so we've assembled, you know, data over the last few years. And so we hope this will prove helpful to you, just to kind of get a sense a little bit of what this looks like. This is Southeast Michigan. You see Detroit here on the far east side. Each one of these shapes, teardrops, I'm not sure, each one of these represent a middle school or high school that our students have been to over the last 3 years. And as before I zoom in a little bit, just to give you some sense of where we are here, Ann Arbor is in this concentrated space down in here. But over the last few years, we've been as far west as Chelsea, which is probably a 30 to 45-minute drive to the west. We've been as far east as Detroit, you know, even up in here. This is, let's see here, is this Grosse Pointe? Yeah, we had a placement up in Grosse Pointe, a mathematics middle school a couple of years ago. As far north here as Heartland, and as far south as Dundee. So you can see we've really been all over the place. There are certainly a number of students that end up within Ann Arbor Public Schools, but then, as you can see, many instances where we are outside of the immediate school district as well. We really want students to, again, spend their time in clinical experiences that will stretch them and allow them to grow. And so that's why I said one of the early tasks will be to reflect on where you've been. Where have you been as a middle school and high school student? Where have you been as a postgraduate, maybe in working in different types of schools? And then how can we best identify sites and contexts for you to continue to grow over the next year. A couple of prerequisites for clinical experiences. For practicum, there is a prerequisite related to some blood-borne pathogens training and then a criminal background check. And then for student teaching, there's also a criminal background affidavit that everybody will sign. One other thing to mention here before I transition to the MTTC information is that the practicums and the clinical experiences look a little bit different based on endorsement area. So your initial endorsement area largely governs whether your clinical experience is a year-long in duration from August to June, or is broken up into a fall term and then a winter spring term. So I'll start first with the first practicum clinical experience, which is at Scarlett Middle School in Ann Arbor. Conversations are still being had, but we are, fingers crossed, hopeful, excuse me, that there will be an opportunity to engage in face-to-face clinical time this summer at Scarlett Middle School on the southeast side of Ann Arbor. And last year, the school ended up running in a virtual platform, but we're hopeful that there could be an opportunity for face-to-face. It may be virtual as well, but we're excited to be able to bring that clinical experience back into our program this summer. We're very, very optimistic, and everything looks very promising that that'll be the case. And everybody will be there across all of the content areas. Typically, the English, history, social science, and world language interns partner with a rising 6th, 7th, or 8th grade English teacher. And then our math and science interns work with a rising 6th, 7th, or 8th grade mathematics teacher. Then into the fall, English, world languages, and science interns typically remain in the same classroom from August to June. Our mathematics and history, social science interns have had slightly different structures over the past few years. This past year, the mathematics interns spent part of the semester in small groups, first in a middle school, while half of them were in all of them were in middle schools in small groups, and then they all transitioned into high schools for the second half of the fall semester, all in those same groups. And then when it came to the student teaching clinical experience in January, they had a chance to, again, engage in a cycle of reflection, thinking about where they needed to spend their final clinical experiences, and then were distributed across middle schools and high schools. And then in the history social science program pathway, those interns were in small groups, and they spent half of their term in a middle school, and then the other half in a high school. They two groups of students kind of swapped places. So they had actually the same pair of mentor teachers, but not at the same time. And then when it came to the student teaching term, they were in their own classroom, mostly one intern to one mentor teacher. So there are some differences based on your initial endorsement area as it comes to the shape, the structure of your clinical experience. And then there are some students who will be pursuing additional endorsements. And if your additional endorsement is in an unaligned area, so for instance, a biology initial endorsement and an English additional endorsement, both of those endorsement areas are not in the same content area. And so that student would have a 30-hour clinical experience in their additional endorsement area in the fall term. And we'll talk more about this. There will be more communications about this, but I just wanted to make sure I touched on that briefly before we transition into the MTTC. So the Michigan Test for Teacher Certification tests, this is something that all certified teachers in Michigan must pass before they can be certified. And these tests are subject specific. So there's one for every endorsement area. And it's meant to ensure that each certified teacher has the necessary subject area knowledge to be an effective educator in Michigan schools. The MTTC tests are computer-based, and they're taken at testing facilities. They're offered year-round for most subjects. World language offerings are limited, and you can see that here. You can register for the MTTC tests and access the deadlines, the preparation materials through this website, through this URL. I'll see if there's a way to share this PowerPoint with you too, but luckily it's right here, www.mttc, and maybe we can even toss it in the chat as well. What's important is that when you register for the test, that your score report is sent to U of M Ann Arbor. So you just want to make sure you identify the code number 28 so that we receive it. A common question that we often get is, well, when should I take this thing? And what we typically tell students is to take it when you've completed nearly all of your content area coursework as it's related to your endorsement area. So for some students, that might be before they come to the university, before they start their program, because maybe they completed all of their content area coursework as undergraduates or prior to the start of the program, I should say. And so this test will be a measure of a lot of that knowledge. And so students have taken it before they enter the program. We typically encourage students to take it no later than the January of their time in the program, just so that in the event that the test ends up being harder for some students than others, that they have a couple of other opportunities to take it before they get to a point where they would typically be recommended for certification. And so because it is a requirement, it's important to maybe take it a little earlier than later if you can, just to make sure that you earn an appropriate score. Our students continuously do very well on these tests, and there are many different preparation materials available for you to prepare so that you can feel comfortable as you get ready to take it. So with that, I'll go ahead and cut myself off here and maybe answer any questions that you might have. And again, I'm joined by my colleagues as well. Maybe there's a question that they might be better situated to respond to, but we're ready.
Good afternoon. I'm Xavier Hanna. Can you hear me?
I sure can.
Hi, I'm a teacher at math. I teach 7th grade math at Bethune Academy in Detroit. I was able to pass the MTTC, and I have the interim teacher certificate. I understand that part of the complete certificate in Michigan is that you have to have a master's in education. Isn't that correct?
You do not. You don't need a master's degree in order to earn a standard teaching certificate. Was that what your question was?
Yes.
Yeah, that's not a requirement. Most institutions have undergraduate programs. And so, for instance, we do too. And so students, after they complete their undergraduate degree, as long as they've completed the other necessary requirements, they can earn a standard teaching certificate upon completion. It is required that you have a degree.
Right, and then at the same time, it is required to have a master's to reach the master's level pay, however.
No, can I jump in here? This is Kendra Hearn, I'm department chair. Sorry, I'm not on video, guys. Sometimes when I turn on my video, my audio goes out. And that's been happening in the past few days. So you are working under an interim certification?
Correct, yes. Hi.
Yes. Are you in our alternate route to certification program or a different one?
Yes, I'm in the alternate route.
Okay, so you don't need to be in MAC. All you need to do is teach a third, have a successful third year of teaching to earn the standard certification. So I'm not sure, which year are you in Mark?
This Xavier.
Yeah, is this your first year?
This is my second year.
Okay, so I'm going to have you talk to Jean Marachko, who's the Associate Director of our Alternate Route to Certification program, and she will tell you what the requirements are for the third year. But once you complete the third year program, which is different than the first and the second years, you will earn your standard teaching certification. So you don't need a master's degree or to be in the MAC program. You will have the same certification that our MAC students will have once they complete MAC.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. I'll put Jean's email in the chat for you, Xavier.
I just sent it to him, Kendra.
Thanks, Katie.
One thing that Xavier did mention, though, was the compensation schedule. So I thought I might piggyback off of that. The compensation for teachers is typically on a table with columns and rows, and the rows typically correspond to years of service, and the columns typically correspond to degrees or credits towards degrees or post degrees. And typically the first row and the first column would be your first year of service with a bachelor's degree, which is where our undergraduates will be hired at. MAC graduates, however, would be hired largely in that first row still, probably that first year of service, but probably over a column or two, depending on what that particular pay schedule looks like. Some districts have a column 2 that might read like bachelor's plus 18. They might even have a row 3, row or column 3 then might say master's or bachelor's plus 30 or something like that. So that it was something that Xavier mentioned, so I thought it might be helpful to share that tidbit.
Right. And also, could I add that in Detroit, they started us at row 11 this year. Every certified teacher starts at row 11 or step 11.
Well, there you go.
Could I ask a question?
Please.
So I actually have two now. I'm curious, do you know how some districts handle commiserate experience when it comes to, I don't know, non-secondary related teaching? I know that's probably very individual, but just figured I'd ask.
I do think it's going to be very specific on the district. Kendra, did you hear that question?
Yes, I did.
Do you want to share any insights from your prior years as an administrator?
Yeah, so I spent a huge portion of my career as assistant superintendent of a suburban district, Detroit district. Actually, the district is called West Bloomfield School District. So yes, it does depend on each district. You'll find that districts who have teacher shortages may be more inclined to give you credit for years of service. So in the instance that Xavier mentioned, not only did people in that case, they didn't even need years of service to be given, or I'm sorry, Superintendent Vitti decided to be able to recruit more teachers to the district because there's such a high need to start everyone last year, way up on the scale at step 11. But you may find other districts who are willing to give you credit. Usually it's not more than 3 years credit for past teaching experience. And usually it's for teaching experience you've done in a school setting, under certification. So not if you substituted or if you taught under an emergency permit, but it's certainly something to take with you to an interview as a question to ask the people that are interviewing you if their district doesn't indeed give credit for prior service.
Thank you. And then the other question I had was related to the School at Marygrove program that I know you guys have cooking over there. I'm very interested in placement potentially at Marygrove. So if someone could speak to that, I'd love to hear about it.
Yes, I will talk about that as well. So thanks to all of you who have indicated on your application that you are interested in the Detroit teaching pathway. That helps us sort of get you in the pipeline for consideration. And if you didn't indicate on your application that you were interested and are, please either reach out to me or even Katie or Kevin, and we can forward your name along to the group of folks, which includes myself and Kevin, but some other people at our school who are working on that. So the School at Marygrove is a Detroit public school. It's completely run by Detroit Public School. We are one of a few partners. Part of our role is working with them on curriculum design, but also to initiate a pathway or a pipeline that would feed teachers into Detroit, not just into the School at Marygrove, but hopefully into other schools, since there's such a great need. And it's part of our commitment to Detroit. You may or may not know that the University of Michigan was first founded in Detroit. It moved later to Ann Arbor. And we have a real sort of sort of moral imperative to help Detroit school children and other units, other schools and universities feel that same commitment in their discipline areas to be of service to the Detroit community. So the other piece of that pipeline is a residency program we've created. This is our dean's vision of creating a residency that is really housed at the School of Marygrove for our teachers to learn the work of teaching, specifically in that environment. And it uses an apprenticeship model that's often sort of the way that medical teaching schools are, or medical teaching hospitals rather, do in partnership with medical schools, where interns are placed there and they learn side by side with a master teacher. In this case, in a hospital setting, of course, it's a doctor, and that person is called an attending physician, which would be the equivalent of, and you might hear these terms used interchangeably, a mentor teacher or an attending teacher in our program. So that's that same concept. And people who finish the residency or their internship there are considered for a residency there, their first year teaching. So you're able to continue receiving university support from the School of Education during at least your first year of teaching. It may be even up to your third year if you stay at that particular site. The placements that we have there are limited because the school is small. They're adding the 11th grade this coming year, and so there'll be a total of 300 students by next year. But we have sort of an agreement with them to sort of not inundate them with interns, because they do need residents, because they do need master teachers there. But we do have a relationship enough with Detroit that people who still want to be in the Detroit schools for their placement, that we can place you there. And eventually, hopefully, have you still be connected with the School of Marygrove for professional learning is the aim. So again, if you haven't indicated to us already in your application that you're interested in the Detroit teaching pathway, please contact any one of the members of our team here, including Katie, to let us know, and then we'll make sure that you get more information so that you can decide if you want to move forward with being considered.
For what it's worth, in the coming weeks, as we begin to open up the Canvas course shell and the different components within the shell related to pre-orientation, there will be a clinical experience survey, and that everyone will complete. And one of the questions will directly ask whether you're interested in the U of M pathway with the school at Marygrove. And if you select yes to that question, you'll also get identified into this subset of people that will then receive all the additional information you need so that you can learn a little bit more and then decide whether it's something you want to move forward with, going through the application process and such. So for what that's worth, you don't necessarily need to email a bunch of people in the suite if you don't need to or want to. If you just select a response on that survey, that will be sufficient.
Hey, I have a question about placements, actually, which I think you just kind of started to touch on with the Marygrove response, but I wanted to know how that placement process works in practice for the spring and or for the winter and spring terms. Do you take into account people's location and then preferences / needs for the program when you're placing them, or is it more handed down? By the sounds of it, it sounds like it's kind of collaborative between the students and the program. Am I right in that?
Yes, there is an opportunity for teaching interns to provide some input into that placement process. The very first step of the placement process is something we refer to as the collecting step, where we're collecting input from both teaching interns through the clinical experience survey, through their own resume, and there's actually a questionnaire that goes with that process as well. And simultaneously, we're collecting input from our mentor teachers, from our pool, to see who's interested in partnering with us for another year. And to the extent possible, can they shed any light on what their teaching assignment might be, so that we can really start to pull together those two data sets to then start thinking about potential matches. So actually step 2 in the process is matching, where I'm working with our content area faculty leads in each of the disciplines to then review the data, the intern data, as well as the mentor data, to then determine matches. Does that help?
Yeah, that does.
And can I also add that while we, try to attend to people's personal preferences, and we're sensitive to geography in terms of, distances traveled, it's important that you come to campus prepared to be able to get to your placement. And it could be, as you saw the map, in the Grosse Pointe instance, and I think the Dundee were particular situations, but you could see the range of distance that interns could potentially be placed. Again, we try to be sensitive to people's concerns about driving in the winter, or childcare needs that may restrict their ability to get various distances within the time needed and so forth. But we can't accommodate everyone. These placements, and this is largely Kevin's role, are really particular. Like, we just don't put you anywhere. We just don't say, hey, is there a teacher somewhere that will take some of our folks? We really look for particular types of teachers who worked with us or are familiar with the program or willing to learn the program, in schools that, we hope are really healthy places. They may not always match what we are sort of teaching you in theory and in practice, but they're still healthy places to hopefully learn from. And the placement process is, quite particular, and Kevin does a great job. But if everyone wanted to be sort of, around the corner from the School of Ed, it's not going to work, because we also have to make sure that the placement is one in your content area, and that the teacher's schedule will match up with, our schedule, that you can actually be there while teaching is occurring and so forth. So just be mindful of that as you're making your plans to come to Ann Arbor area. Think about transportation. We have had students carpool, where one might have transportation and others may not. But you can imagine how that can get complicated as well. So really consider how you're going to get around. There is public transportation in Ann Arbor, but anyone familiar with the southeastern Michigan area, we do not have mass transit. So there's no rail system or anything of that nature that would sort of get you, say, from here to Detroit reliably. But yes, Kevin takes all of these things into consideration and does a really great job of matching folks. So usually we're able to get people in places that are reasonably, easy for them to get to, and also great places for them to learn to teach.
Thank you. Yeah, actually, I'm kind of like the opposite, the flip side of that, where I formerly worked in DPSCD and would love to go back, and it's way easier for me to get there than actually somewhere in Ann Arbor, unless I were to move. So
right. So that's a great example of when you fill out that survey, make sure that you indicate that. So great.
Yeah, thank you. I have one additional question too. You talked about the additional endorsement process. That's new, I think, right? Because that's a little bit different than the understanding I had from like the website and previous discussions. Like, are you saying you can take additional classes during the program in a specific content area?
Kevin,
I think I can take that one. So
okay.
what I mean by additional endorsement area is that sometimes students pursue more than one endorsement to put on their teaching certificate. So it's rare, I shouldn't say it's rare. There aren't as many students that chip away at brand new endorsements from scratch during the program, because there really won't be time to do that. But sometimes, for instance, we have interns based on perhaps their undergraduate degree. Maybe it was fairly well split between chemistry and biology. And maybe they spent more time in the chemistry classroom, but they chipped away at a lot of biology coursework that maps really nicely onto the biology endorsement. So for that particular student, maybe they just have, you know, one course left in order to complete the body of work that represents the biology endorsement area. A couple of endorsements that tend to occur during the time of the program. English as a second language is one that happens entirely with the program. The first course is actually in the fall term, and then there's another course in the winter term, but a bulk of the coursework is done actually in the spring and summer term at the end of your program. And then there are students who perhaps are adding mathematics as an endorsement. They'll have some mathematics coursework that they're taking in the fall term that's directly connected to their endorsement area. Does that help?
Yeah. That's what I was hoping it was going to be. Because like I qualify for the economics endorsement with my undergrad degree, but I only need like 3 courses or something for the full social studies endorsement, and I didn't think there was space to take any classes at all that would like fulfill those requirements, but there potentially is, from what you're saying.
There could be, but it would something I would really encourage you to have a conversation with one of our academic advisors earlier than later, either Angela or Sarah Powers, Angela Sands, to help look into that a little bit. And this will apply to a lot of people, you know, especially this same analogy could extend into the sciences, right? Where somebody might have spent a lot of time in biology, but may only be a couple courses away from the broader umbrella that is integrated science. So that might be something just to investigate and to see what opportunities might exist. You know, maybe there's something that can be done in the spring term prior to the start of the program. I know there are students that maybe try to find maybe an online course through another institution that they can gradually chip away at. Quick side note, if that happens to be one of you, set a schedule and stick to it. There are lots of students who sign up for these online courses at different institutions, and then they say, oh, I can wait another week till I get to it. I can wait another week till I get to it. And then the end of the 365-day course is only weeks away, and they have to slam through an entire course in a couple of weeks. So that's just a caveat.
That's a very helpful question for me also. Is there, so I could pretty much go to your website and find the requirements for each endorsement?
Yes. The body of work for each of the endorsement areas is available through the website, and you can see how we've identified different U of M courses and how those are the sets that are required for any particular endorsement area.
Just a word of caution, I think Kevin may have been alluding to, is that oftentimes the university courses will not match up with our schedule, right? They'll be offering the class that you need at the same time that you need to be in the field, or that you have to take one of our courses. So that's why it's important that you talk with an academic advisor. They often know when the courses are typically offered. And if you find out now that one is not likely to be offered at a time that you'd be able to take it, but it's the one that you need, you can then also talk with them about other places, either in the area or online, that offer a course. And oftentimes we've already approved many of the courses that people need to take to meet the requirement from other institutions.
Yeah, the one thing that I was a little confused by was then my coursework evaluation that I received back for the social studies endorsement. A couple of them were marked as covered during the program, so it was like like doing history and then like world history from such and such year onward.
Yeah, so those are ones that you'll be able to take here, and they are built into the schedule in such a way that they won't conflict. But you could still take a course somewhere else prior to coming that has been approved to meet those same requirements, but you would need to check with the academic advisor to be sure that the course will sort of match up and will count. So, our program is pretty intense. You are getting a master's degree and teacher certification and all in 1 year. It's a challenge for many people. And most people make it through just fine, but we are, I guess my caution is if you can take and get some things out of the way before you come, that would be better, will free up your time and it'll allow you to, focus on the things that you actually really have to do, even to earn endorsement in your initial endorsement area, or earn certification in your initial endorsement area.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Just another caveat for those online courses. Don't set yourself up for a scenario where you have to eat through a bunch of the coursework during what is supposed to be a reprieve for all of you. So don't plan on doing all of your online coursework, for instance, at the end of August or over the holidays at the end of December. You're going to want those breaks. You're going to want those opportunities to just refresh yourself a little bit and take a breather. You don't want to be so involved with coursework and clinical all semester long to then reach a point where you can't relax because you're trying to chip away at all these different online course requirements all at the same time, only to pick back up steam again in January, for instance. So I'll just put another plug in there. If you take those online courses and there's a schedule, try to adhere to it, try to chip away at it a little bit each week so that it becomes manageable.
Connor, I see you have your hand up. Did you still have a question?
Yeah, I'm mostly curious. So I don't have a driver's license because I have epilepsy. And I'm wondering the extent to which not having a driver's license or not being able to drive will become a hindrance between getting to classes and getting to being able to student teach, and if there are any previous experiences with that.
We have had students who have had different medical conditions that have prohibited them from driving. We have had students who have had, I'll leave it there. And so there are instances then where some reasons become really, really important to secure local clinical placements. And so we do have, as you saw in that previous map, or we have partnerships within Ann Arbor Public Schools. And we have connections in Ann Arbor Public Schools across, I'll safely say it, all content areas. I know we do. If I dig deep enough, I know they're all there. And so I think we could resolve the clinical experience piece. In terms of coming to classes, as Kendra had mentioned, Ann Arbor does have public transit within the city that's spread out, like a big spider's web in all these different directions and things. So I would think that you could get to classes, especially during the fall and winter term when the buses are running more often, that you would be able to do that with, I don't know, ease is maybe a judgment, but I think it's manageable.
Yeah, it's manageable if you live, yes, within the Ann Arbor, or it's called AATA, Ann Arbor Transportation Authority, within their routes. My oldest son is a undergrad graduate of the university and graduate school of public health graduate. He's taken the bus through both programs and gets everywhere, and still taking the bus now to his job on campus, because it's free for students, by the way, and it's rather reliable as bus transportation goes. And you'll find plenty of other students as well as faculty and staff probably riding along with you on those buses, but it's important that you be within the AATA bus route. And if you go to their website, you'll be able to check it out if you are sort of scoping out places to live in relationship to campus.
Yeah, I've lived in Ann Arbor my whole life.
Oh, great. So then
Are people who went to AAPS unable to work in AAPS? Or not work, but student teach in AAPS?
Not at the same school, nor with the teacher that you may have previously had as an instructor when you were in K-12.
Okay, yeah, all right. I think that the further questions might be individually based, but thank you
Well,
for the information.
Yeah, for what it's worth, I mean, that student comes, or that question and scenario comes up every year, where we have AAPS graduates in our program. I can think of 3 right now. In the survey that I had mentioned earlier, you'll be asked, you know, what is the name of the high school you graduated from? When did you graduate from that high school? So that we can get a sense, because we do try to not send interns to the schools or school districts that they graduated from. And we do that for a couple of reasons. You know, one is we want you to see different schools. You know, we want you to spend time in different communities. But there are circumstances every year that have us just kind of look at the variables at play. But I would simply echo, you know, what my colleague had said. You know, we would definitely avoid the high school that you graduated from. Ann Arbor is such a large district. We might even touch base to get a sense of maybe some of the teachers you may have had there. So because they move around themselves, right? And so we would just want to be conscientious of that. We try, yeah, to be conscientious of that. But you know, there's lots of middle schools as well, and so it could be possible that you find yourself in a middle school.
And can I also add that if you do have a condition or a disability, to strongly consider registering with the Office for Students with Disabilities. If you aren't already, if you weren't like an undergrad and already registered, I don't even know if you would need to register again if you were registered an undergrad, but make sure you're in their sort of in their list of folks to support. They will give you a visa with accommodations that your clinical site, your instructors are obliged to do, sort of like if you had, you know, a plan in place in high school or what have you. So, and that's another reason why I want to underscore that is for those of you who just want to be near a place where you live out of convenience, why we can't always accommodate that, because our obligation is to accommodate our students who have real reasons, disability wise or health wise, that they need to be in placement sites that are closer to where they live or closer to the School of Ed. So consider registering with the Office of Students with Disabilities as soon as possible so that you can get that on record.
I had a quick question about endorsement areas as well. And just once you graduate from the program, can you still like take classes and then take the MTTC for those different endorsement areas and get those put on your, like, I guess, transcript?
Not through our traditional program. So it has a lot to do with state of Michigan law that typically like new endorsements sort of come with a degree. But you could return through our alternate route program to add additional endorsements. So you heard me mention in response to Xavier earlier, who's in our alternate route program, which is, I won't go into too much depth, but you're not a student of the university. It's more like a continuing education program that you could participate in. It would require 3 years of participation. It's charged, the program charges far less in terms of fees than U of M tuition rates, but that's a way to add endorsement. Now, other states may allow you to go through some sort of traditional program to add more endorsements, but typically, no, you would be starting kind of all over again to add more endorsements through our more traditional programs.
Okay, so like any endorsement that you maybe have like 1 or 2 classes that you still need for, it'd be best to actually try to get those done while we're still in the program.
Yes.
Okay.
And I would say that's also in part because you have learned that you're only 1 or 2 classes away from U of M Ann Arbor's collection of body, you know, for coursework. If you were to take that coursework to another institution, you might be 5 courses away. And the standards are constantly changing as well. So you may be 1 or 2 courses away from U of M Ann Arbor today. You know, years from now, you might have to start all over again. But to answer maybe a portion of your earlier question, teachers can always add endorsements, you know, forever into the future. You know, if you want to teach an endorsement area that is completely different than what you're preparing for over the next 12 months, that's something you can do. I mean, there's other things you can add to your licensure as well. So even if your interests completely pivot and go in another direction, you might have to start from scratch, but you can always add, you know, endorsements to your certificate. It just might take a little bit longer to get there.
I just have a quick question. It was kind of brought up earlier about like if you have like 2 endorsement areas for something, like you mentioned like English and biology. I was wondering if for history and social studies, are there 2 separate placements required for the history and social studies endorsement, or would a history placement work for both history and social studies?
Great question. If your additional endorsement is aligned, so it's within the same endorsement area, then you do not have an additional clinical experience or methods course. What we do on our end is we ensure that part of your time is spent in that subfield, in your case history, so that you have the minimum number of clinical hours needed to add that as your additional endorsement. But that same thing would happen if it was the biology chemistry person or the physics chem or something like that. So yep, if the additional endorsement is aligned, then you typically don't have an additional endorsement or an additional clinical experience. The one caveat, and science is actually a good example, because in that instance where you do have, because the closest comparison to your scenario would have been somebody who has integrated science in chemistry. But there are situations where students have chemistry and biology. Now, sometimes we have mentor teachers who teach chemistry and biology. So it all works out wonderfully and it's no big deal. But then there are some instances where we end up having to place that person with somebody who teaches maybe full biology, and maybe that teacher also has a class of physics. So our intern really isn't equipped to support them in the physics classroom. So what we might do is during that free block is maybe partner that intern with a chemistry teacher, for instance, so that they can accrue those necessary hours. But that's just a part of the jigsaw puzzle that is clinical experiences, and kind of mapping that all out. Jigsaw puzzle is not even enough. I need something three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle, maybe that moves too. It's like shifting and moving all the time as well. Yeah, moving Rubik's Cube, Alex, we'll go with that. Well, I want to give you a couple minute break perhaps before you jump onto your 4 o'clock. I don't know how many Zoom meetings you've been in today, back to back Zoom meetings. So I'd love to give you at least a couple moments. Know that additional communications are forthcoming. We are so excited for you to be with us today, and we're excited about what's ahead of us. Please feel free to reach out to myself, to Candace, to anyone who is here today, or anyone that you come across to ask a question. And if they don't know the answer, I'm sure they can get you in contact with someone who does. But in our chat window here, my colleague Katie did share the link for the 4 o'clock. I don't know if you have it elsewhere. So I'm actually going to just hang around in this room until like just after 4 to make sure you can all get here. And then I'm going to stop the recording as well. But if we can be of any assistance, please know that we're here to help. Hopefully you have a great day today, this weekend. Hopefully the sun is shining wherever you are. It's a little cooler this weekend in Michigan, but hey, it's not 30. So have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You mind if I squeeze in a question for you right now, Kevin?
Please.
I'm Jack. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Sorry I showed up late today, and I'm sorry if this was covered already.
That's okay.
Hybrid learning. Do we know what that would look like in 2021?
I can tell you what it looked like in 2021. Were you a student recently in like U of M, for instance?
No.
Okay, so I can tell you what it was like this past year, and there's a chance it could be similar. I think the president made an announcement today at 2. Candace, I don't know if you heard it or not. I don't know.
I was there.
And what was it?
There weren't a lot of specifics,
Okay.
but for fall, they are pushing for as much in person as possible, safely.
Okay.
With the caveat that everyone who has wanted to be vaccinated has had the opportunity. And with the caveat that we may need to adjust appropriately. But the goal is for in-person, the goal is for residence halls to be at 80% capacity. Units are defining large lecture because large lectures will remain virtual, but each unit is going to make decisions about what that is. So there will be some SOE classes that may be determined to be completely virtual. But our dean and our leadership needs to define what that large class will be. So.
Great. I'm going to stop the recording here just for a moment.